Our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Sandy Johnson. Sandy is a native of eastern Nebraska up in the Blair area, but she's grown to be purple and shed off most of her red ways. And so she is our area livestock specialist out in the Northwest, out at Colby, but she actually covers the whole state. All of our specialists have statewide responsibilities, and she does that too. But she's going to talk to us this afternoon about optimizing reproductive performance. So, Sandy, I'll turn it over to you.
We'll have to have the short person adjustments here. Well, it's a pleasure to be able to visit with you this afternoon. I know it's a beautiful day to be outside this time of year, and I know it's hard for many of us to be inside in a classroom setting when it's really nice outside. And so as we're doing that today in the spirit of education, we'll be looking ahead to the coming breeding season and enjoying some of that weather, and hopefully it'll be just like today when we need to be out there working cows. And I'm hopeful that I'll have a slide here in a minute to share with you. And what I want to talk about today is certainly looking at reproductive efficiency, but the emphasis will be on including some new research data that relates to that, as well as perhaps some old things. Now, I got to aim this one? Well, what we're not going to talk about is reproductive efficiency from, I don't know what perspective we call that, but we won't be talking about octagonal reproductive efficiency. What we will try and talk about is some of the more current protocols that we think you should be using for synchronizing estrus, and talk about some costs as it relates to reproduction, and that's where we'll try to put together the whole concept a little bit better of reproductive efficiency and bringing that up to date. Now, I want to share with you as we begin a slide from my colleague Rick Funston up in Nebraska. This summarizes some data from their research herd at the Goodmanson Sandhills lab. And there's about somewhere over 2,000 cows in those that are represented by non-synchronized with a 60-day breeding season. And I think 400 to 600 in the category where it says synchronized and a 45-day breeding season. And this represents both columns are natural service breedings, but a synchronization did occur and used bulls to service those animals on that 45-day breeding season. You'll see that then we have shortened the breeding season from 60 to 45 days. Now, and think in your mind also, don't have a number to put on it, but would you rather calve cows out for 45 or 60-day breeding season? We have some labor savings there. We see the birth date average, which when we have a distribution that's not normal like a calving distribution should be if it's the way we have lots of calves early, the mean is not much different. But you'll note that we have a higher percentage of calves born in the first 21 days, 73% in the group that was synchronized. Weaning weight is about 20 pounds different. If you put a dollar value on that now, so you've got $25 or so difference in value of those calves at weaning, if that's how you choose to market them. Pregnancy rate remained the same using that shorter breeding season. Now, when they went from 60 to 45, they had synchronized the previous year, so they've already begun to group those cows up. I don't want you to believe that you can just change the breeding season one year and get the same pregnancy rate, perhaps, depending on what that calving distribution looked like. But clearly, synchronization helps us wean more pounds of calf at weaning. And the nice thing about this particular data set is that it represents natural service sires, so we're not confounded by the fact that we always are trying to use better genetics on our AI sires, and we've got that confounded in any weaning weight we would look at. And so this allows us to get a better handle of that effect of synchronization on weaning weight, and we see a tremendous impact there. So if you're looking at increasing profitability, shortening your breeding season in a fashion like this allowed that to happen quite effectively. Now, the system that was used in that particular situation is shown here, and it's not a new system at all. It's merely turning the bulls out for 5 days, then running everything through, giving an injection of prostaglandin F2 alpha. Anything that was bred in these first 5 days would not respond to the prostaglandin injection, so we don't have to worry about that. And then the synchrony off of this single injection of prostaglandin is not so tight that we can't use natural service sires to cover that. They're using in the range of 1 bull to 25 cows in that case. At Miles City, they use a similar approach, but they're actually going to like a 32-day breeding season, which is essentially 2 chances to get pregnant, and they're in an 84-85% pregnancy rate. And so it's a way to really reduce the length of your breeding and calving season, and should increase the average weaning weight of those calves by doing so. Now, I want to direct you to this protocol sheet, and this represents the recommended synchronization protocols for beef heifers, and notice that you have a 2009 date on it. For those of you who have been here before, you know that I've talked about these recommended protocol sheets, and that represents an effort by a group of us within the academic community, as well as veterinarians, semen companies, other allied industries, to say, let's develop a concise, a short list, if you would, set of recommended protocols for people to operate off of. There's lots of things you can do, and a lot of people that want to tweak things, and surely I can make it a little better, and perhaps you can, but these are tried, true, tested, good opportunities to get good results using these protocols. So I want to point out that we do review these every year. You see a 2009 date on the top of those. If you're looking at something that says something else than 2009, you'll know it's not the most current. So we have a set of protocols for the heifers as well as the cows. And what I wanted to talk about now is one of the new protocols that we've added onto the cow protocol sheet. And to do that, then, we see 2 protocols. One, I should have brought my own remote that I knew how to run. This one is just too many buttons for me. This is our traditional 7-day cedar protocol with timed insemination occurring at 60 hours. Now, this represents what was done experimentally. You see 2 injections of prostaglandin there. That was to compare it to this 5-day program down here. Now, the idea of this 5-day program was to perhaps develop a follicle that was a little younger at the time we gave prostaglandin. And so then when we remove the cedar, we would get a more responsive follicle to the increased LH pulses that would come here, and perhaps produce more estrogen, more standing heats, and improve our conception rate. That was some of the general concepts that went into the development of that protocol. So let's look at a little bit of the data as a result of studies into this. One more thing, though, before I go on, is we do see these 2 injections of prostaglandin. Now, the reason that's needed is for those cows for which this injection of GnRH induced an accessory CL that would be then 5 days at the time we remove that cedar. 1 injection of prostaglandin would not be enough to cause that to regress. We needed a second injection in order to get rid of that. And so that protocol does require this 2 injections of prostaglandin. Now this shows the estrus distribution from those protocols I just showed you. You see they are very similar. It does appear just from your eye that perhaps a few more early heats with the 7-day protocol, but statistically there was not any difference in those that displayed estrus or the interval to estrus. This would summarize a variety of studies put together by Mike Day at Ohio State. Shows several Ohio State studies. Virginia Tech was working on this, as well as one of Mike's students who's now at Purdue. And the bottom line is they compared the 5-day system to the 7-day system. They were getting excellent results. You see the overall average there, 68%. They made various comparisons along the line. Here's where they did try and use 1 injection of prostaglandin. Notice they had a tremendous drop-off in pregnancy rate when they tried to get by with 1 injection of prostaglandin. Just not going to work in that protocol. But they did have some excellent pregnancy rates. Now we tried, looked at this protocol last year at Hayes in cooperation with John Yeager, Keith Harmony, Justin Bolte, and looked at the 5- and 7-day protocols and looked at a shorter interval between prostaglandin, which I think I failed to mention was 12 hours in most of the previous studies, saying, okay, if we ran these cows through, injected them, and then came back and maybe had a break after we injected them, and we could kill 3 hours and put them back through another time, maybe it would be worth it. So that's what we did. We saw very little difference in pregnancy rates in comparing those 2 treatments. There would be additional data from Missouri with no difference in timed insemination of the 5-day to 7-day. However, as I showed you earlier, some of the Ohio State data, Virginia Tech, did indicate some benefit. At this time, my recommendation to you is that the 5-day protocol is appropriate where you're willing to give those 2 injections of prostaglandin, and maybe 5 days works into your system a little better than 7 days. I would not go into it expecting a big change in pregnancy rates at this point in time. So the protocol sheet specifically then looks like this for the 5-day protocol. I'm showing here 8 hours difference between these 2 prostaglandin injections. You saw some data with just 3 hours. The important thing is that you have to have 2 injections several hours apart. Can't give them 2 doses at one time. Prostaglandin is released in a pulsatile fashion, and we really need those 2 injections if that's going to work. Okay, sorry I'm slow with this slide advancer here. Okay, what about heifers? They did look at this same protocol on the heifer side. It summarized a lot of that data here. Again, this is Mike Day's slide. You see that the overall pregnancy rate in timed insemination of these about 54%. Using 1 injection, and in this case 1 injection in heifers seems to work as well. We have not included this protocol on the recommended sheet yet, just not that comfortable with it on heifers. Heifers seem to respond differently to GnRH and some other things in the system, so at this point we have not included that as a recommended protocol. Just to show you a little of our experience with that this year, again, these were the replacement heifers out at Hayes, and I'm showing you this data not so much because of these 2 different protocols, which were the 5-day Cedar and the Cedar Select, but because we had this type of result, in which case the 5-day Cedar shown in the yellow bar, we really just kind of, can I use the word tanked, John? Is that okay? Okay. So if the animals that we bred on detected heat, 86%, 29% estrus detection. Now, if you'd come to me and said, this is the type of results I had, I would ask you a series of questions, and we'll look at some of those questions in a minute, but surely there's seems like there might be something going on. Same pattern where we looked at whether it's those that we bred strictly on time to AI or looked at the overall pregnancy rate to AI there, you see that, we were drastically different. Well, what did the heifers look like on paper? Well, age, very similar there. The weight, if you figure these heifers were coming out of 1,300-pound cows, this is about 60% of the mature weight, and I think that's right where we'd expect to be for a very good place to have them. Body condition score, just where I would like it. There were 3 heifers out of the entire group that weren't cycling. The lesson I think we need to take away from this is that we do have variability. Pregnancy is a yes-no response in this case. We are going to see from time to time these types of responses. Now, nobody wants it to be theirs. I don't expect to find any other reason other than chance that this result occurred. But it did occur. You may have it happen to you. It doesn't mean necessarily, particularly if you used one of the protocols on my recommended sheet there, that you should necessarily tank that protocol. Now, perhaps you did do something that it didn't quite work, but understand there's variability there, and some people get 80% sometimes, but not all the time. Now, I want to move on and talk a little bit more about reproductive efficiency in a general sense. And if we really want a handle on what's going on in the cow herd, having this measure of percent calf crop, the total efficiency of that cow herd from how many cows were exposed to the bull and how many calves we weaned is a very important measure. We can utilize that in a variety of ways, but as we look at tighter financial times, it's going to be important for us to look at our current break-evens or our unit cost of production and say, where are we at right now? And as we evaluate those annual cow costs, we need to make sure that we're accounting for our level of reproduction. And so you'll note here that we are essentially adjusting our average weaning weight by that percent calf crop so that we're not fooling ourselves by how many calves were actually produced from that amount of feed that was delivered. Now, you heard Dr. Spear indicate the importance of risk management and not making assumptions. I would challenge each of you to have this type of data, and what we have here is essentially percent calf crop over a long period of time in 2 different herds showing different levels or, average percent calf crops as well as different variability. Do you know what this looks like in your herd? I think it's very important to not assume that you know and to actually go to the trouble. I maybe shouldn't call it trouble. Go to the effort of actually making the calculation so that you're making your plans based on hard data. Now, let's just look for a minute at this slide. It's a lot of numbers, and I want to walk you through it here. And this is how we might use that information in planning and deciding what level of reproduction or what changes in management might affect our reproduction and our overall cost structure. So on the far left, we have different percent calf crops, and I've just used one average weaning weight, but in your mind you could see how we could expand this table to be much broader in weaning weights. And we see our weaning weight per cow exposed, and if you're sharp with your math, you see that weaning weight per cow exposed is that weaning weight times the percent calf crop. And over here we're looking at 3 different costs per cow, from $650 to $750. Now, if we could get 100% reproduction, which is pretty hard to do, but some people might get close to that. If we could get 100% reproduction or 100% calf crop and it cost us $750 per cow, is there a production system that might be more economically attractive or lower our break even? Well, yes, indeed there is. And If you lowered cow costs by $100 from $7.50 to $6.50, and were able to do that and only change your percent calf crop 90%, also assuming your weaning weight stayed the same, you have a lower break even at that point than the higher pregnancy rate and the higher cost. Doing this type of thinking, one might say, if I changed X about my operation, what's it going to do to my cost? How's it going to impact reproduction? Take you through some of these thought processes as you're trying to deal with the current economic conditions, managing risk. If I take this particular production practice, will it increase my risk? I think we tend to We think we know our cows so well, and in a lot of ways we do, but sometimes we need to look at our cows on paper to do some of this planning and thinking about changes that might be necessary to stay viable in the type of economic conditions we're in. So I really think doing this type of homework, using the numbers, and knowing where you're at is important to knowing how much reproductive efficiency you can afford and what changes you might incorporate. Now I want to talk just for a few minutes about heifers. John's going to take you further into the heifer development discussion, but I hope I'm going to set the stage for that discussion just a little bit and think about things that have happened over time. This shows some genetic trends from the Angus breed starting back in 1972 and up to the current time for mature weight as well as scrotal circumference. And it's no surprise to anyone that we've increased the mature size of many of our animals, selecting for growth, and we've done an excellent job of increasing the growth rate of these animals. We started selecting for scrotal circumference a number of years ago, noticing not only is it related to fertility in the bull, but helping to reduce age at puberty in the daughters of those bulls. Now let's think back in time then to our discussions about heifer development and puberty in heifers. And when I first started any type of academic studies, there was discussion about calving at 2 years of age versus 3 years old. At this point in time, there would be very few producers in this part of the country that would even think about waiting to calve until 3s. Then we were talking about the importance of getting enough weight and gain in these heifers to reach puberty prior to the start of the breeding season. A little bit further down the line, how many of you have seen, either in your own operation or somebody else's place, a juvenile delinquent heifer? Okay, she's calving at, way before she should. Anybody seen those? Okay, we didn't see those when you were a child. Do you recall those? No? We're probably making some changes there. We've had several reports in the literature now about precocious puberty in heifers. We've made a lot of selection changes, and we're able to measure some things very well. It's a little bit harder to measure puberty in the bigger sense of the entire herd, but chances are we've been making some changes there. So as we look at what's going on there and trying to develop and talk about the heifer programs that John's going to talk to you about, and now thinking from the perspective of those of us that are trying to do research as well as education in these areas, even though we've got these genetic trends going over time, we still have a wide range of genetics out there that we're trying to develop. And so I think that's created some challenges for us. Now, you're familiar with probably the concept of a target weight, where you take this initial weight of this growing heifer. We say that she needs to be such and such a size as a mature cow, much as I talked to you about our replacement heifers at Hayes, weighed 770 pounds. When we bred them, we expected them to be 1,300-pound cows. We were about 60% of their mature weight at the time we bred them. In order to reach that projected gain as we need to have a good handle on what our forage quality is and what the expected performance is off of that, and achieve a balanced ration to do so. Now, as you look at the list of things that are up there, there's a lot of times that we don't know just where we're at on weight on those heifers. And even, I'm sure John could tell you times that he was targeting rations that had he not been weighing those animals frequently, would not know, or oftentimes the performance may not match exactly what he thought they were going to do, probably because of maybe milder weather conditions, forage quality turned out better than what we thought. All those things might play into role there. So a key thing that we have to keep in mind then is that in order to achieve this target weight concept, how many of those steps require some form of measurement? Okay, we need to weigh the animals. We need to know something about our mature cows, assuming we know their mature weight. We need to know how much we're feeding them. We need to know what the feed quality is. As various parts of that formula, in the real world, we don't achieve all those. Things begin to become problematic. So what is our response in the case of lower cost feedstuffs? Well, we're going to feed a little bit more, and that can really help us out then. You know, we're always worried about reaching puberty. We'll feed them a little more, feed them a little more. And we've overcompensated in that regard. So what happens then when we take that approach, as feed costs get higher, that becomes much more expensive to create those heifers in that fashion. They're heavier condition, higher cost to produce. And perhaps then we're not taking advantages of our additional resources when we go to grass with those heifers later on. They actually are static for a period of time because they were, you know, had such an ability to gain. And really my point of showing you the growth rate on the mature size was it amazes us sometimes on how well we have these heifers gaining now, and it's almost hard to keep them down to the target weight we want. So I think we've created, in some of the things that we've done to select better heifers that grow better, we've created a little more challenge that forces us in these times to make those measurements more important, to make sure we know what it is we're actually achieving before they get, and this isn't a heifer, but this is a fat cow, okay? It's not cost effective to do that. And you understand that it's not cost effective, but I want to encourage you to take the measurements and monitoring, make no assumptions to get there. And these are some of the tools we might use, is measuring forage quality, measuring weight, making sure we're keeping the records and taking the time to assess that data. I think that's all very important, and we tend to sometimes let that be relegated to a lower place on our priority scale. Just as I wrap up here, then I want to point you to a website, Applied Repro Strategies. It's easier to remember than actually another website that is developed by a group of reproductive physiologists that I work with to put on the Applied Reproductive Strategies in Beef Cattle workshops. Our last meeting in Fort Collins was essentially captured online on this website. You can see all the presentations, or the slides, the PowerPoint slides, audio of those presentations, and at some point we'll probably should have the proceedings up there as well. And that's essentially over a day-and-a-half program on synchronization systems and reproductive management. Also focus a lot on the male on the second day. So this is an opportunity for you to get segments of that at your own speed, and goes into essentially much more depth than we're able to in this situation. And so we'd encourage you to utilize that resource as you have time and interest to do so. So with that, I want to leave some time for questions here. And so Larry, we'll turn it back to you for some questions or whatever folks need at this time. Does that mean I can ask them questions? Well, we'll take his question first here. Well, so if you have cows that are scheduled to be coming in heat from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, well, what you're going to do is induce ovulation in anything that hasn't had an LH surge already. And in some cases, the follicle would be at a good point to do that. We do know that if we induce ovulation in smaller follicles in a synchronized setting, that our fertility is not as high. So potentially, I don't know how to transfer the actual multiplicative into a recip situation, but there would be some lowering of fertility as opposed to if they ovulated on their own. But I think I haven't seen any data comparing those. Generally, they're going to palpate those CL and decide if they like them, and so that's as much help as I can give you on that. I haven't seen any direct comparison of GnRH, no GnRH in that setting. Pregnancy rate-wise, what we have seen, and I'm not sure how many cows we would need to see at the pregnancy levels that we're looking at there, but we're not seeing large differences with like 800 cows per treatment, GnRH, no GnRH, but yet it's not very expensive in that time to AI situation, and we think it's well worth it if we're getting a few percentage points on the long run. Yes.
On heifers, is there any parameters that you can measure to select for to try and increase your percentage of cycling
Well, I would think the heifer fertility, EPD, and those breeds that have that should help us work towards that. Not every breed has that EPD right now. We can do reproductive tract scoring of those heifers before we breed them and get a sense of where they're at. But you're really looking at a genetic selection. Is that correct for long term? So I think that the heifer fertility EPD is one direction that we need to go. Now I've seen there's a little bit of information in the literature that might lead me to believe that we might at some point be able to measure something about number of follicles or ovarian size I'm not sure if I can tell you what age to learn something about that, but that's pretty long way from being applied yet. And so perhaps as we start looking at more of these genetic tests and association with some of these things, maybe we'll figure out something sooner. But right now it's kind of that heifer fertility is what we know. Well, I think you can use cedars on both cows and heifers. They have a place in both situations, and I would say my decision on the system to use in cows or heifers would have to do with a lot of logistics. If you can feed MGA, you cannot beat MGA prostaglandin in heifers, okay, for cost and effectiveness. Now, if you tell me I absolutely want to time breed heifers, well, you won't get quite as good a results with an MGA prostaglandin time breed as you would a system with a cedar to time breed. So those decisions. And the cows, I'm probably going to use the cedars in the cows, and you could go to a non-cedar system if you had a lot of cows cycling, or selectively use those cedars in cows that are mature, they calved early and you expect that they're already cycling, and just use the cedars in late calving, thinner conditioned cows, younger cows that might need some boost in terms of cyclicity. I'm probably out of time, Larry, but I'd sure be happy to answer any other questions later when that opportunity availed it.